up next.
A moving target. President Obama wants Congress to back off its insistence on trying to get a veto power over the Iran nuclear deal, a deal that appears to be different than originally advertised. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. President Obama's quest to get his legacy nuclear deal with Iran from theory into practice may have to go through a Republican-controlled Congress, whether he likes it or not. The president is asking lawmakers to stay at arm's length on a tentative framework critics see as an outline for appeasement. One particular issue, the ongoing evolution of an agreement that is anything but set in stone. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry has tonight's top story.
As President Obama presided over the annual White House Easter egg roll, which included shooting hoops with kids and NBA stars, he also launched a full-court press to sell the nuclear deal with Iran that's looking increasingly shaky, laying out what he considers the Obama doctrine in an interview with the New York Times.
The doctrine is we will engage, but we preserve all our capabilities. And I've been very clear that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon on my watch.
Except today, the leader of the terror group Hezbollah backed the deal as a way to avoid world war, the type of endorsement that leads Republicans to crank up their charge the president capitulated to the Iranians.
Obama is a flawed negotiator. His foreign policy has failed on multiple fronts. Nobody in the region trusts him. The Iranians do not fear or respect him.
A key example cited by the GOP is this December 2013 promise by the president.
We know that they don't need to have a underground fortified facility like Fordo in order to have a peaceful nuclear program.
Today, Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz said something far different. The deal would only strip down the facility at Fordo.
He was saying either wiping it out or shutting it down altogether. What changed? Didn't you? It seemed like you moved the goalpost here.
Well, to me, the key is, and our objective was to make sure it was not a breakout pathway. It is not. There is even no fissile material allowed into that facility.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is still deeply skeptical, with his aides warning the option of an Israeli military strike against Iran is still wide open.
This is a deal that leaves Iran with the capacity to produce the material for many, many nuclear bombs, and it does so by lifting the sanctions pretty much up front.
Another area of contention is sanctions, with Iran again putting out talking points suggesting the penalties will be relieved almost immediately, while the White House has suggested a more phased approach.
This deal is not done yet, and it won't be done until all of the details are locked down, hopefully by the end of June.
Hopefully is not good enough for Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Bob Corker, who's pushing for an up or down vote as early as next week on the tentative deal.
There's strong bipartisan support for a binding vote by Congress.
Now, the president will not admit and confirm that he'll have a binding vote. Instead, he talks about a non-binding vote. Just did an interview with NPR in which he responded to Netanyahu's demand that as part of this deal, Iran recognize Israel's right to exist. The president said that's a fundamental misjudgment, a sign the relationship with Netanyahu still a bit tense. Brett? Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. Kenyan warplanes are conducting airstrikes against Islamic militants in Somalia. They're in response to last week's massacre of 148 people, mostly Christians, at a university in Kenya. That country's president has vowed harsh measures against al-Shabaab terrorists based in Somalia. ISIS terrorists blew up an 80-year-old church in northeastern Syria on Easter Sunday. Syria's state news agency reports no casualties. The attack happened in an area where Christian and Kurdish militia have been battling ISIS forces. Meantime, Pope Francis is calling on the international community to end what he calls its complicit silence as the growing violence against Christians continues. The Pope told an audience today the world must not look the other way. Saudi Arabia's campaign to drive Shiite rebels from Yemen may be intensifying tonight. Correspondent Connor Powell has the latest tonight from our Middle East newsroom.
With the fighting in Yemen showing no signs of letting up, the International Committee of the Red Cross says a humanitarian crisis is brewing. Basic items are in short supply. We have been without water for 5 days, says Mohammed, and the Houthis have been attacking us every day. efforts to deliver aid into Yemen have been hampered by the violence, and calls by the Red Cross for a ceasefire have been ignored. Nearly 2 weeks ago, Saudi Arabia launched airstrikes to stop the advance of Shiite Houthi rebels. The Iranian-linked fighters have taken control of most of Yemen, and Sunni Arab countries fear the Houthis' rise to power will expand Shia Iran's influence in the region. So far, the Saudi airstrikes have done little to slow down the Houthis, and the crisis in Yemen has only worsened. Today, Pakistan, which is part of the anti-Houthi coalition, said Saudi Arabia has requested it contribute troops to the operation, raising the possibility of a ground offensive, which just recently Saudi officials seemed to rule out. Over the weekend, Russia floated a proposal that would impose a total arms embargo on Yemen. That idea, however, was immediately rejected by Saudi Arabia. Still, as the air campaign increasingly looks unlikely to solve the conflict in Yemen, the State Department defended the Saudi strategy.
We have said that's one of the main goal of this military action is to ensure actually that they get back to political dialogue and to push back on this aggressive action by the Houthis. So our position on that remains unchanged.
The chaos in Yemen has allowed al-Qaeda to expand its footprint in the country, and as of now, the Sunni Arab coalition has shown no willingness to target their fellow Sunnis, despite al-Qaeda's threat to the West. Brett?
Connor Powell in our Middle East newsroom. Connor, thank you. Let's get more now from Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States, Adel Al-Jubeir. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First, you saw that piece. Tell us where things stand now from your perspective, your country's perspective in Yemen.
We are determined to protect the legitimate government of Yemen, protect the people of Yemen, and degrade and destroy the military capabilities that the Houthis possess that could be a danger to us. The air campaign has been extremely successful. We have taken out the Air Force, we have taken out surface-to-air missiles, we have taken out ballistic missiles that the Houthis were in possession of. We are degrading their heavy weapons capabilities and those of their allies, and so we are going systematically through our target list in order to eliminate a potential threat to, and a dangerous threat to not only Saudi Arabia but the world.
You do not have ground troops in now?
No.
Are you considering it?
We are considering all possibilities, and we will deal with them when the time comes. Right now the focus is on the air campaign, which is going very well. We are providing military assistance to the popular committees in the south. These are Yemenis who have split from the military or from units loyal to Ali Abdullah Saleh and joined in the fight against the Houthis. We're beginning to see them being able to change the situation on the ground in favor of them and to the disadvantage of the Houthis. Brett, the effort in Yemen, we always say failure is not an option. We will prevail, we will destroy the military capabilities that represent a threat to us, and we will defeat and degrade and the Houthis, and we will work towards bringing about a political settlement that moves Yemen towards a better place.
You've asked Pakistan for help, for aircraft, warships, soldiers. Is that country coming through?
I don't know where the status of those discussions are. We have a coalition of over 10 countries. We have a number of countries that have expressed an interest in participating in one way or another, and we have conversations with a number of those countries.
Is this a proxy war against Iran?
I would call it a war of necessity after we were left with no choice. For 3 years the Houthis have reneged on every promise they made, every commitment they made, 67 agreements to be precise. They have moved the goalpost. They have moved from Sa'ada to Amran, taken over Sana'a, then taken over the rest of Yemen. They imprisoned the president, they imprisoned the cabinet in their own homes, and then they were moving on Aden in order to complete their takeover of the country. And this is when we had to move in response to a legitimate request by the President of Yemen under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. We moved in. Our objective is to protect the legitimacy in Yemen, to protect the Yemeni people from a takeover by a radical group allied and supported by Iran and Hezbollah.
What do you say to the people who look at that and say, with these airstrikes and the action so far, you are creating a chaos vacuum and empowering al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula?
We are very focused on al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula along with our American allies. We have programs ongoing to confront that threat that I cannot talk about. We are determined to ensure that Yemen does not become a safe haven for terrorists or a failed state. Brett, I want to point out something to you. In one day we had an attack against the Saudi border post by the Houthis. We had an attack by Ali Abdullah Saleh's forces in Aden, and we had a prison break in which hundreds of prisoners escaped, including al-Qaeda operatives.
On your border?
in Mukalla, in the south of Yemen. My question is, did this all happen as a coincidence, or was this somehow organized or planned in order to enhance or strengthen Al-Qaeda's presence in Yemen so the Houthis can make themselves look like they're fighting the terrorists when in fact they're not?
When asked about Iran's threat to you, Saudi Arabia, other Arab nations, this is what the President said in a New York Times interview over the weekend. As for protecting our Sunni Arab allies like Saudi Arabia, the President said they have some very real external threats, but they also have some internal threats. Quote, I think the biggest threats that they face may not be coming from Iran invading. It's going to be from dissatisfaction inside their own countries. That's a tough conversation to have, but it's one that we have to have. What do you say in reaction to that?
I don't know that he was specifically talking about Saudi Arabia. He said Sunni Arab states like Saudi Arabia, but the issue of the conversations that we have internally in Saudi Arabia, or the economic development plans we have, the education issues, the reforms that are taking place in Saudi Arabia are all meant to counter extremism and to enhance the standard of living of the Saudi people and to improve the quality of life for Saudis and to provide them with opportunities. So we've had a booming economy for almost a decade. We've had unemployment rates that have dropped substantially. So I don't know that he was talking in this case specifically about Saudi Arabia.
What about on the other side of the coin, this Iran nuclear deal, or framework of a deal? I read today that Saudi Arabia is praising at least what they're seeing so far. Is that true? On one side of the Middle East, you're fighting Iran-backed rebels, and on the other, you're praising this nuclear deal?
I don't know that we're praising this deal because there is no deal. There is a framework agreement in which a set of principles are outlined that have yet to be negotiated or yet to be nailed down. What we have been saying is that we have been assured by the President and by the Secretary of State that Iran will not be able to have an atomic bomb as a consequence of any agreement made, that all pathways to an atomic bomb will be closed to Iran, that Iranian research in the nuclear area will be severely restricted, and that Iran will be subject to continuous, intrusive and unprecedented inspections. So that all is very positive to us. But we haven't seen the final agreement yet, so we can't really render judgment on it.
If this deal firms up, last thing, if this deal firms up as this framework envisions it, will that make Saudi Arabia want to get a nuclear weapon?
I can't comment about whether we obtain a nuclear weapon or not, but what I can tell you is that we will do whatever it takes to protect our people and our nation. Two things we don't compromise on: our faith and our security.
It sounds like a maybe.
I cannot comment on this, but sorry.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Up next is the Rand Paul who will declare his presidential candidacy tomorrow, the same Rand Paul we're expecting. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 45 in Baltimore, with a Delaware couple and 2 children sickened during their Caribbean vacation. Health officials say Steve Esmond and Teresa Devine were poisoned by a deadly pesticide apparently sprayed near their villa in St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The 2 boys remain gravely ill. Fox 25 in Boston, with closing arguments in the Marathon bombing trial. Prosecutors as a terrorist who wanted to punish America for its perceived crimes. The defense says Tsarnaev's older brother, who was killed in a shootout with police, was the mastermind behind the attack that killed 3 people. And this is a live look at Nationals Park from Fox 5 here in Washington. Big story, opening day for our home team, the Nats, and most Major League Baseball teams. The Nationals, who are picked by many to win the World Series, are hosting the New York Mets. We'll talk about Charles Krauthammer later. That's tonight's live look outside and just for tonight inside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.